Think of the past two 49ers off seasons as a giant jigsaw puzzle and realize that there is one final key piece that no one seems to be talking about in the correct context that the 49ers must place into the right spot so that they get their business done. And yes, that piece is a new contract for Trent Williams. I decided to wear the finance guy's vest today and the green and money, because we're going to delve into this. 49ers are busy signing free agents, one of the busiest teams in the NFL. In fact, the spending spree probably bigger than most people who follow the 49ers had expected. Last night, they added Nate Hobbs, cornerback, who had signed a $48 million contract with the Green Bay Packers last year. He ended up being very injured, and I think the Packers played him in the wrong position. They played him on the outside. I think that he's a really good run defender, really good slot guy, and I think that Raheem Morris has a lot of creativity up his sleeve. More on that later, though. That's just a look at the big picture. The 49ers keep on signing players at prices that I don't think people expected them to sign players. Hobbs is making over $4 million, so this is no minimum signing. If you look at the 49ers salary cap situation right now, they're under $10 million in 2026 space. That is based on my calculations. I think about $7 million, but I am putting in estimates for cap hits right now. We're going to have the actual numbers hopefully within the course of a few days. So remember that salary cap room is connected from season to season. Unused space moves over from season to season. And remember that the 49ers costs go up in 2027 because of the way that they structure contracts. For example, Brock Purdy is going to see a skyrocketing cap hit. Same thing with Fred Warner. Same thing with George Kittle. So you have to carry over a good chunk of unused space from 2026 to 2027. I don't know exactly what that amount has to be. The 49ers don't know exactly either because they don't know what the cap is going to be as it rises in the future. But I can tell you for sure that they need to carry over more than $7 million. So they need to open up salary cap space this season, not only for the carryover purposes of future sustainability, but also so they can finish their business this offseason. 49ers still have more than 20 spots to fill on this roster, and they have only 6 draft picks to do that in a cost-controlled basis. So more signings still have to come. Is Joey Bosa a target? Absolutely, he's a target. But they're going to have to get him at the right number. And, you know, even if they do get Bosa, that's not it for the offense and the defense. There are still other positions where the 49ers are going to have to insulate. So we talk about opening up salary cap space. The one way to do it in an efficient method is by finding a good contract extension for Trent Williams. You're going to have to spend money to open up money. And that's how the NFL salary cap works because of these prorations. If you give out a signing bonus or an option bonus, the money prorates over up to 5 years against the salary cap. It stretches out like an accordion, and that allows you to keep the salary cap hit low. You've heard over the course of the past couple weeks that the 49ers think that Trent Williams' $39 million 2026 salary cap hit is too high. Translation, they're planning to spend, which we've seen. They had over $40 million in salary cap space just a few days ago. It's under $10 million now. They're planning to spend this year, and they need more near-term space. They're also very interested in keeping Trent Williams around because he's one of the best left tackles in NFL history, one of the best in the game still right now, even entering his age 38 season. So they've got to find a way to make two things work. And the way that you do that is you pay out more guaranteed money now. Trent's contract expires after the 2026 season. You prorate that money against the salary cap into the future, and you could theoretically lower his salary cap hit from $39 million right now to, I think, about $24 million. You can free up about $15 million of space by extending Williams. Now, you're threading a needle here. You're playing a short-term game and a long-term game. The short-term game opens up space, but you can't just give him a blank check to open up that space because then you screw yourself for 2027 and beyond. So you have to find a number that works for the team, and that's why the 49ers are negotiating hard with Trent Williams. Now, the next inflection point is March 20th, so that's a week away. right? It's March 13th right now. March 20th, Trent Williams is due a $10 million roster bonus. That roster bonus will commit the 49ers. They're not in the financial situation right now to give Trent Williams $10 million and have that become a sunk cost. If they give him $10 million, they better be ready to proceed with the full contract. So it's a leverage point for Trent Williams, right? March 20th. The 49ers need to figure something out before then. And obviously, Trent would like the security of knowing his future. I think that in a weird way, the 49ers investment in all these veterans, they brought in Dre Greenlaw yesterday. Obviously, they traded for Odighizuwa. Mike Evans is the headliner, and he's talking about being the last piece the 49ers need to go out and win a Super Bowl. I think the addition of all these veterans, it is a carryover of the spirit of 2025 when the 49ers won 13 games. They beat the Seahawks when they were healthy before they had to go to their JV team. But even with their JV team, they won 13 games last year. They kept on fighting. They believed that they had a championship DNA. So I think that this spending is a reflection of that. And I think that in a way, it is something that they're dangling out in front of Trent Williams is, hey, this is a team that we're building to be ready-made to go for it for a championship in 2026. We're going to have you work with us, take a little bit less money so that we can put you in as that final piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Because Trent solidifies left tackle on an offense that now features Mike Evans at the X. He solidifies left tackle on a team that now features Odighizuwa at the defensive tackle position and Dre Greenlaw supporting Fred Warner again at the linebacker position. Trent Williams plays left tackle on a team where Nate Hobbs has now joined as defensive back, who probably is going to allow this secondary to become way more amorphous. I could only imagine maybe even some safety action for Nate Hobbs. Again, really good against the run, but I think he could work in conjunction with Upton Stout very well. Upton, of course, led the NFL, all cornerbacks in pressures last year. So Trent is a linchpin of this football team, both on the field and financially, because you can lower that salary cap through an extension, but you just have to find the right number. So yes, this is fascinating stuff. I know that nobody has really discussed or uncovered this because it's complicated, because you're threading needles, short-term and long-term. Almost feels like I'm that crazy guy that's connecting a bunch of dots on the wall. But I have connected the dots, and I see the numbers. I see the 49ers now with less than $10 million in salary cap space. Yes, Joey Bosa, those guys still on the table, but you're going to have to slash Williams' salary cap hit while keeping him aboard on the team. So this is all not for this is not all for naught, right? You have to do that. You have to thread that needle so you can continue threading the bigger needle, and that is creating the most powerful 2026 roster possible while maintaining long-term sustainability, which has long been the 49ers' goal. All right, I had an interview on KMBR talking about everything, a meaty interview on KMBR. Go ahead and enjoy.
Good morning. Yeah, it's been a really, really entertaining week and probably more fun for fans than last offseason for the 49ers. But I was making the point yesterday that I think that last offseason had to happen for this offseason to work. They had to reset their spending last offseason because they had a bunch of their own guys to pay. So they spent a ton of money on their own guys, Purdy being the headliner, but because of that, they weren't very active in free agency because they had really kind of pushed it in 2024 to try to run it back, and that didn't work. So they reset everything, and we knew they were going to spend more this offseason, but the way that they've spent on some of these established guys like a Mike Evans, like a Dre Greenlaw, bringing him back, really shows that they're going for it this year. And I think whenever a team goes out and gets veterans, ready-made veterans, name recognition veterans that signal it's a push into the middle of the table, that gets fans really excited. And I think that's what we're seeing with the 49ers right now.
Yeah, and David, to your point, one of those guys that the 49ers had to cut ties with last year was Dre Greenlaw. When he signed a deal with the Denver Broncos, he was released, and we saw yesterday that the Niners are bringing him back on a one-year deal. So how big do you think this is for Fred Warner and that 49er defense?
Well, I think I need to see the numbers of the deal. I suspect that it's a lot like Mike Evans' deal in that because Dre didn't play a whole heck of a lot last year, I think he had 323 snaps, and Mike Evans didn't even hit 400 snaps either. What the 49ers can do in both situations is rack up some not likely to be earned incentives because not likely to be earned is defined by what the guy did last year. So, for example, if you put 400 snaps in Dre Greenlaw's list of incentives, it's technically not likely to be earned. And that means that it doesn't count against the salary cap, even though he has a relatively good chance of earning that incentive. So same thing with Mike Evans. That's how his deal is $14 million as a base value per year, but worth up to $20 million. I think that Dre's obviously on a smaller scale. It's worth up to $7.5 million, but I think some of that are not likely to be earned incentives that can protect the team. So I think that for just an upside deal, once we see the numbers, I think we're going to say that this is a good swing for the 49ers. I'm sure they've protected themselves here because he hasn't played all that much over the past 2 seasons. But boy, I think you cannot forget that Dre Greenlaw, prior to that Achilles tear in the Super Bowl, was the best player on the field. The Chiefs didn't do anything over their first 2 drives, and he was flying around like a man possessed. And I don't think the 49ers have forgotten that. I don't think they've forgotten how well he paired with Fred Warner. I don't think they've forgotten the attitude, that meanness, the Mike Tyson meanness that he brought to the defense. And on a flyer deal with some incentive money, really trying to encourage him to yield at least a couple more years out of his career, I don't think you can really lose there.
David Lombardi, the voice you hear from the sfstandard.com. Everybody should read and subscribe and get that great coverage. Mike Evans, let's get back to the conversation he had with you guys yesterday. The headline quote was, "They're one piece away, and I'm that piece," which is fun for all of us in the sports media industry. Was there something else or that he said, or for you, is that the signature takeaway?
Well, I think he's speaking the truth there. I think that a lot of people have forgotten due to the fact that the Seahawks won the Super Bowl and celebrated in the 49ers locker room a couple weeks after beating them really bad. I think a lot of people around the nation have forgotten that the 49ers beat that Seattle team when they actually were playing with their varsity in week 1. And they not only beat the Seahawks in week 1, they statistically dominated them. That was a multiple possession win. Had Eddie Pinheiro already been with the team instead of Jake Moody. I mean, they had 400-plus yards. The Seahawks had 200-something. It was a muscle-flexing performance for the 49ers to begin the season that I think signified that the reset in the offseason had gone well. And then, obviously, they hit injury hell, and they still hung on to win 13 games. But that's just the honest recollection of how that season went. So I think that Mike Evans recognizes that. I think he did his research. He's been around this league for quite some time. And he said, that week 1 49ers team, before they went through injury hell, the one thing they were missing was an X receiver. And remember, against Seattle in week 1, they still weren't able to run because they didn't have the X. Like, the X receiver is more about the run game, I think, in Shanahan's scheme than anything else, because what he does, playing that split end position, drawing the safety over at least a couple steps on every single snap, is he opens up the running lanes for Christian McCaffrey and company. So, yes, Brock Purdy and Mike Evans, I think, are going to be a good passing combination. Purdy and tall receivers, that should always be good news. But it's the 49ers' run game and the running explosiveness that I think can really benefit from a big body at X, that obviously is also going to be able to block on the perimeter. But the other thing that Mike Evans said was that he chose between the 49ers and Buffalo. Buffalo needed a number 1 wide receiver as well, and he said a really good quarterback and a really good play caller is important to me. I don't think he said Josh Allen's name, but we know that Josh Allen is a really good quarterback. He showered a lot of praise on Brock Purdy, and I think that this is definitely an acknowledgement that Brock Purdy is one of the best QBs in the game.
David, Mike Evans also talked about how big a part of the recruitment process George Kittle was to bringing him to the San Francisco 49ers. Now, there's a possibility that George Kittle is not going to be out there week 1, so just the factor of having Mike Evans in that lineup, what it can do for the goal line offense, but also George Kittle's part in recruiting Mike Evans.
Well, George is a big body and the 49ers run a relatively amorphous offense to where, there have been years where George Kittle is the 49ers wide receiver one. And there are years where, I think every year when George Kittle's on the field, it tremendously benefits their run blocking. Last year, when he was available, they were a top 10 running team. When he wasn't, they were in the bottom 10. So there's a big, big swing there. If George isn't available or isn't at 100% or close to it early in the season, again, it helps to have another very, very big body. He's not going to be lined up in line like George Kittle sometimes is, but it helps to have that very big body on the outside, drawing safety help and able to block on the perimeter, because their explosive run game last year was non-existent. It took them forever to get their first 20-yard run, and it wasn't the offensive line's fault. It wasn't Christian McCaffrey's fault. They were not spacing the field, and then they were not blocking in space last year. That was the issue for the 49ers. They had long prided themselves on being able to, A, space the field with the X receiver back when Brandon Ayuk was available, and B, just viciously block with their receivers, and they were doing neither of those two things downfield. I don't think it helped that Jawan Jennings was playing with 5 broken ribs. So I think that Mike Evans helps give you a little bit of slack there, even if George Kittle is unavailable. But George, he's long said that Mike Evans is one of his favorite players, and I think it's because Mike blocks. George loves football players, right? And Mike at 6'5", 230, even as a wideout, is somebody who George really respects because of the physicality he can bring to the game.
Yep, the voice you hear is David Lombardi, who covers the 49ers for the San Francisco Standard, sfstandard.com on the UMA guest line. You're listening to KNBR AM and KNBR FM, San Francisco, the sports leader, a Cumulus media station. There's so much to get to, David, including Bryce Huff. And listen, this happens on occasion. It happened to the Chicago Bears and Drew Dahlman just a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And I think back to Chris Borland, the linebacker of the 49ers, who suddenly retired. So it happens on occasion. And I don't know if the 49ers had any inkling that Bryce Huff was going to retire, much less to get into the lithium-ion battery fire protection business. That was just maybe one of the most unexpected storylines I'd ever conceived of. Regardless, it leaves the 49ers with no edge rusher there. Your analysis of that situation, how big of a loss to the depth chart is it, and what's the solution?
Well, it might have been the loss of a draft pick, because I'm not convinced that the 49ers weren't going to try to trade Bryce Huff, and I'm sure Robert Saleh would have wanted him with the Tennessee Titans. We're trying to figure out how exactly the 49ers are going to architect this front, and I know that they just traded for Odighizuwa. It's going to be a 4-3. We know they're going to stay in that base, and I think the interior linemen are no mystery. But what are they going to do with the edge rushers? Because John Lynch has hinted under Raheem Morris that they're going to go for an expanded profile where these guys can drop into coverage and be more of the 3-4 type hybrid defensive ends. I think the 49ers want to make this defense much more multiple this year. And if that really is the case, I'm not so sure that Bryce Huff's lighter, pure edge rushing profile fit. We saw him not fit in Philadelphia with Fangio the season prior to the one that he came over to the 49ers. So I honestly would not have been shocked if the 49ers had traded him in the final year of his contract. Probably would have renegotiated his deal. Nothing was guaranteed on the deal to the Tennessee Titans or to a team that was going to run exactly what Bryce Huff was brought in to do with the 49ers when Robert Saleh was the defensive coordinator. For that reason, defensive end was still, even before this news yesterday, was a position I thought the 49ers were going to go after an expanded profile in free agency. Somebody like Trey Hendrickson was going to be way too expensive, but Joey Bosa is still out there. 49ers went after Joey last offseason, but they had a very strict price limit last offseason during the reset, and the Buffalo Bills exceeded it. This year, they might be willing to extend themselves a couple million more for somebody like Joey Bosa, and I think that would make a whole lot of sense. And with Bryce, I watched the video when he retired yesterday, and the battery thing just kind of came out of left field like 2 or 3 minutes into the video. Hey. He's been in the league for 6 years. It wasn't a short career. He made himself some money, and kind of a cool ending to his career too. It didn't go well in Philadelphia for him, and he was traded to the 49ers. Took a lot of heat there from the media and from the fans, even though he had a torn wrist ligament, didn't fit well into the system when they changed schemes over there. Comes over to the 49ers where the Eagles are still paying over half of his salary. And his final win was that road playoff game in Philly. And he made a couple big plays, including a tackle for loss in the fourth quarter, while the Eagles were paying him the majority of his salary. And maybe the competitor in him was satisfied with that. Nice little piece of revenge at the end of his career. Had quite a bit of money in the bank, and he did fight through some injuries last year for the 49ers. So maybe he felt that it was time to walk away. We saw it with Dahlman, right? Like you said, this game takes a tremendous toll on your body. And if you've got enough in the bank and you want to make sure that you enjoy your 40s, your 50s, and your 60s, maybe this isn't the worst decision.
Few more minutes here with David Lombardi on the Uma Guest Line this morning. And David, you mentioned a name, Osa Odighizuwa. What do you think about the 49ers sending a third-round draft pick to the Dallas Cowboys for that return? How does he fit in with this defensive line, and what does he do differently than the other defensive linemen in this building?
Well, here's the thing, that the reset wasn't just a financial one last offseason. The 49ers had to just rebuild football fundamentals from the core. They were terrible in 2024 stopping the run. Number 29 was the final rank, but by the end of the season, they were the worst team in the league stopping the run. It was embarrassing. Nick Bosa said so. He didn't like to be associated with that bad of a run defense in the locker room of that final game against Arizona. So there was a lot of uproar in the offseason when they were releasing guys, but it's like that team wasn't good. Like, why would you want to run it back with a team that literally embarrassed its star player with how bad it was against the run? So anyway, they released these veterans who were pass rush first guys like Javon Hargrave, Leonard Floyd, Malik Collins. And when they went back to the drawing board with their draft picks, they very, very specifically went after run defenders. So Michael Williams, really good run defender. Alfred Collins, C.J. West. All these guys have to develop as pass rushers, though. But the goal was accomplished this last year. Look at all the splits when they were healthy. And I know it's challenging to do because there were so many injuries. But when those guys were on the field and healthy, especially Michael Williams, it was a top 10 run defense. And that's a remarkable turnaround given all the veterans that they let go. But that's why they turned it around, is because they let go of the pass rushers who weren't good run defenders and switched it around to the run defenders. Now, the downside was that they didn't get any sacks last year, but you can't do the pass rushing part until you stop the run. Otherwise, you'll never have a chance to rush the passer. So basically what we're seeing now is the 49ers saying, okay, when we're healthy, the run defense is fixed. Let's now add the pass rusher, and that's who Osa Odighizuwa is. He definitely is a better pass rusher than a run defender. He's not one of the 320-pound defensive tackles. The 49ers already have two of those guys, though, in West and Collins. He's a 288-pounder. He's quick. He's strong, too, but he's smaller, and he's able to win his one-on-ones with those long arms. I mean, he's 6'1", 6'2", but he's got the wingspan of a 6'7" to 7-foot guy with 84-inch wingspan. So he's very, very gifted. He's special in that way as an explosive pass rusher who can keep guards with shorter arms at bay with his long arms. And he has been near the top of all these pressure rate charts in the league over the course of his career. So he's a big money guy for a reason. Fits into the 49ers picture, though, because he's a complement to what they started building last year.
David, so much has happened. We didn't even mention the last acquisition of the night, Nate Hobbs, a cornerback who was originally drafted by Marcus's Raiders and then signed a big contract in Green Bay, but I think got injured. What did the Niners target there? Where does he fit?
So this is one of our more interesting clues regarding what Raheem Morris is trying to build. And I think a lot of the big changes might come in the secondary. Remember, Raheem started his career as an assistant DB coach in Tampa under Mike Tomlin with John Lynch in the room. So the 49ers here and their new defensive coordinator and their DB coach, this is going to be all really fascinating to see how they build things. And Jerry Gray is the DB coach that he brought over from Atlanta. And I look at Nate Hobbs, and I see somebody who was good with the Raiders, and he signed a $48 million contract. Well, what made him good with the Raiders? He was primarily a slot cornerback with the Raiders. Really good against the run, really good at the line of scrimmage. Packers sign him and they try to make him a primary outside cornerback, and he gets hurt a bunch of times, and it's just a season from hell for Green Bay. I'm guessing that the 49ers have looked at his profile. They think he's a freak athlete, a lot like Jason Pinnock. He was actually drafted in between Jason Pinnock and Diamante Lenore in the 5th round back in 2021. I think they see him as somebody who's a little bit bigger than Upton Stout, so might actually have a little bit more coverage upside than Upton Stout, who's only 5'8", but who can also play near that line of scrimmage. And I think they can start doing some creative stuff on the back end, either with dime packages. There are going to be some 5-man fronts this year, which are going to make them more DB heavy to keep up the speed behind the 5-man front. Maybe Stout and Nate Hobbs are going to be on the field at the same time. All I do know is that a contract worth over $4 million is not just some kind of veteran minimum deal here. Let's see if you make the team. I think they're fully expecting him to have a bounce back season to make the team, and then I think that the key is going to be to use him in a better way than the Packers did, because they put him out on islands outside, and that wasn't Nate Hobbs' strength last year.
It's all really good information. It's why you should read David Lombardi and the SF Standard. Just great analysis, great breakdowns. And, man, the 49ers have given us so much to chew on for the next several weeks. I guess the last one before we let you go, David, is there anything left? Is there cap room left, or should they be essentially done?
Well, this is what's really interesting. And, we were kind of all over the Odighizuwa trade before it happened because financially all the clues pointed to it. Dallas needed to clear up $4 million of salary cap space, and trading Osa, because they hadn't restructured him and they restructured everybody else, saved them $4.75 million. So Dallas was looking to shop the guy because they needed to get under the cap. Look at where the 49ers are at now. They started this with like 40 to 50 million in space. My calculations, and because we don't have the exact contract numbers in yet, so I'm just making kind of guesses here, educated guesses on these hits. They're under 10 million at this point, the 49ers are. They're going to need to carry over more than 20 million into 2027 to pay these escalating costs. So you look at, okay, how can the 49ers save some money here? What's going to happen? Guys, the one thing that I think has to happen is that Trent Williams has to sign a new deal. That's the only way that the 49ers can make 2026 salary cap money. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but his salary cap hit right now is $39 million. You've heard all these reports through the national media, which are probably coming from the team, from Adam Schefter, saying Trent Williams' $39 million salary cap number this year is too rich. The problem is that if you just trade him, that number only goes down to $34 million because you just take all the dead money proration and it hits this year. The only way to lower that salary cap number significantly this season is to extend him like they did in 2024, because then you could stretch the salary cap hit out into the future. So it's almost like they have to pay Trent Williams to save money this year. And it's very counterintuitive, but I think that's how everything points in that direction.
That is the all-time salary cap moment right there. You have to pay more money to save more money. It's crazy. And then they just kicking the can down the road. When will that rooster come home? When will that chicken come home to roost eventually?
Well, so, I think everybody would like something that works by March 20th, because that's when you have to pay Trent $10 million in an option bonus. So at that point, you're committed, right? You can't, especially since you don't have a lot of money. Once you've paid him $10 million, it's like, oh God, I know that's sunk cost fallacy to a point, but you just don't have enough wiggle room to be throwing around $10 million for nothing. So I think that they would like to have terms finalized by the time that they have to pay out this roster bonus on March 20th. And I think that Trent understands the leverage he has here, and he wants to make that number as sweet as possible. But the 49ers are in a position where they're like, man, we really want Trent. We are putting money into veterans like Mike Evans, and we're trying to win a Super Bowl this year. And Trent obviously needs to be on board, and we think he wants to be on board for that. So we're going to pay him, but it needs to be at the right number so that the future years too don't get screwed. And it's trickier and trickier when the guy is older and older, and he's going to be 38 years old this season. So they really are trying to thread a needle that I think is more difficult to thread than the one that they threaded in 2024.
Man, oh man, stuff to watch, and we'll continue to watch your coverage all the way. Obviously, next Friday will be a big deal then. We'll see what they do and see what the ramifications are for the future too. So Always a meaty conversation, David. We sure do appreciate you hopping on Murph and Marcus. We'll keep reading you. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks, guys. That was fun.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.